because he wanted to make his movie, and the English said, well, yeah, as long as you make the Irish into savages, we'll give you all the money you need. You know, so he had these Irish coming down, literally, I mean literally, you know, leaping around from tree to tree. So, you know, they do themselves a disservice because they don't learn history, they don't understand. So you can see why we're trying to see this through a very long, deep lens of bigotry and hatred and so on, okay.
Pat, just to stick up here 6 more minutes. No.
Have we?
Somebody was causing trouble in Britain because they hired the Saxons to come in. And in 367, they talked about the barbarian conspiracy.
Yes.
Where the Picts and the Irish and the Saxons simultaneously raided Britain. So some people were not acting nicely in Britain, which compelled them to hire Saxon bodyguards, which eventually turned on them, right?
Correct. In fact,
barbarians were the Germans.
well, they were. Saxons are Germans.
The Picts and the Irish were called barbarians.
Yeah, the real barbarians that came in were the Saxons, actually. Yeah, they were invited in to Kent, and they murdered their hosts, which happened in Scotland and happened in Ireland. It seemed like it was a recurring nightmare. Yeah, the first Saxons, that's how they got in. They were invited in, as you said, in a fraternal dispute, and they murdered their hosts and didn't go home. But that was part of the disintegration of the Roman world. You know, that's what was going on. But they didn't really get a grip on southern England for another couple of centuries. They were not as successful as the Franks later on in France, what became France, into Gaul. You know, the Franks, which were Germanics, came in from the northeast. The island, Britain didn't do terribly well. The Angles and the Saxons didn't do terribly well until the Normans came in. They were still very primitive people compared to the Normans. And the Normans, you know, treated them as such. And so Arthur was a very primitive man compared to William the Conqueror. So as I said, they didn't ever really, the Saxons in southern England and the Angles in the east, you know, they didn't exactly build any great culture for some reason. But anyway, back to Niall. What I suppose I'm interested in how the context in which he lived his life, and as an individual, he seemed to be most of the time away on a campaign. So there's a strong possibility that he did campaign in Europe. I wouldn't want to push it too far, but I would tend to think that if you subjugate or at least rule an entire island, like there's no question that he did, but he was standing on the shoulder of giants, of men that went before him, but he did. The island of Ireland was very united, and he was without any question the head man there. And then to have all of Scotland, short of the wild Highlands, totally under his domain, no question about that. And most of northern England, right down to Hadrian's Wall. That is beyond question. I mean, that is not questioned. Even by Bede, the Venerable Bede, later on, several hundred years later, accepted that as total, that the Kingdom of Ireland, if you like, was all of Ireland, all of Scotland, and down a good deal of England. Now, the likelihood of Niall going down through the rest of England and subjugating it is very, very strong, very, very high, because there wouldn't be much to stop him. And even if you watch, what you call it, the movie, the Scottish movie, Braveheart. If you remember when the English king, Edward, said he was in shock. If he's taken York, he can take the rest, he can take London. There was nothing to stop them. And that was always one of the problems of England. There's no natural barriers there. So once you take place like York, it's just right down the road to London. It's always been like that. So the likelihood of him being able to conquer and subordinate the rest of the island of Britain, very, very strong indeed. And then, because there was so much interaction backwards and forwards with Europe, so that there's very, very strong probability or possibility that he did end up fighting what he considered the barbarians. Now, he would not have had very much regard for the Saxons and the Angles. He would have considered them as barbarians. He would not have considered himself a barbarian. He would have considered this low life that was coming in Kent, from the Germanic areas. See, the Irish were very much in contact with the Roman world and certainly did not consider themselves barbarians. They, in fact, considered themselves in many ways superior. Okay, she's given me the so there's a real possibility. I'll end on that high note on the Alps. They could well have been in the Alps. It's been dismissed because it's only so-called mythology and tradition, but it could very well be the truth. And on that note, I've finished. Thank you.
Tell them about the most famous of the
Patrick?
sons of Niall.
Colin Kill?
No,
Great
Art O'Neill.
Who?
Art O'Neill,
Oh,
the blind harper.
well, we'll let you tell that one.
Well,
But we're gonna have a break.
oh,
We're gonna have a little cup of coffee.
oh, whatever.
But when we come back,
I want to hear this.
yeah, I want to hear it too, because Pat has some great.
You